Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark. I am I'm a longtime student at Don Mountain since about, I don't know, 2008, 2009. And welcome to our Sunday Dharma talk. This is the first Sunday where usually our lamas, Riggs and Drolma or Namgyal Dorje, lead us in a discussion. This started with a talk by Lama Ann. I'm just starting with actually the story of the Buddha. We've continued ever since. So welcome, and so we'll have the next 30 minutes together, and after that we'll have our 11 o'clock hour meditation. I'll guide us through our settling and opening and mindfulness practices, and then at 12 to 12:45, if you are so inclined, we have our Dharma conversations, a time where we can catch up together, have some discussion together about practice and in our relationship with the Dharma. So today, I was inspired to think about connection, and because we've been in our Teaching Tuesdays, we've been enjoying the wonders of the present moment, and we've been talking more recently about Tonglen, about giving and taking, and how that's a practice of being in connection with others and a way to deepen our practice. So that was my starting point, and I worked. So I'll tell you the outline that we're going to go through. We're going to talk a little bit about change and healing. That's going to be our starting point. Then we're going to get into connection, what it means to connection to help with change and healing, and then get into boundaries versus boundlessness. So that's kind of the direction we're going to go today. And I might reference along the way. The only thing I might reference is a big honker from Longshan Rapsham, his book on philosophical systems. So I might reference that a couple times. So my day job is as a psychiatrist, and I'm pretty lucky to work in a place where I'm all the time working with other mental health providers, with therapists, social workers, psychologists. So I get to really enjoy being around a lot of therapeutic growth and change. I don't have to do it all myself, thankfully. So it's a really rich environment. And there's a couple places where I find there's the trajectory of the work I'm doing overlaps with our Buddhist practice. And there's a lot of ways, but two things that came to mind for me were going about seeking change and healing. Healing is a whole thing unto itself, and we probably won't get into that much today, but I'll just give a brief aside of that healing is, I think you could say, is getting in touch with wholesomeness. And by wholesomeness, I mean being more holy with ourselves. So like in some foundational Buddhist philosophy, they talk about the 51 states of mind, which are there's different, there's mind and mental factors, and there's a list of 10 wholesome ones that are, help you build towards enlightenment and peace. And those are all a mixture of there's some flexibility, openness, not having to shut down one part of yourself in order to get by. And that's something I see very much in mental health, that a lot of times when we feel stuck in a rote way, or if we feel like we're suffering, it's because we're trying to get through multiple things that feel overwhelming, and we have to pick one part of ourselves over another part. So that's healing. But the trajectory of change is also a place that we overlap between some mental health work and our Buddhist practice. And there's a lot of ways that we get at change. And a big step is usually talking about connection. And we use it's pretty different where that comes up for mental health work and in our Buddhist practice. Usually like in my day job, we're getting more in contact with, we're learning more about ourselves to change through getting to know our relationship with others, but also with our own emotions and our own identity of ourselves. And so that actually relates often to actually knowing our boundaries with others. Sometimes, usually getting in touch with usually people are struggling actually with feeling that they don't know exactly where they end and others begin. It might be that you feel that like some emotions feel really overwhelming and you don't know how, and that we feel like others really have actually really dictate how we get about emotions. Like it might be that we don't feel confident in standing up for ourselves in a certain scenarios, and so we feel really, kind of, it might be that that we feel, overwhelmed or not confident in ourselves or hopeless, and we feel really that we're at the sway of others, how others come into our lives. Could be the other opposite, where it can be a little more painful the other way, where we think that others owe us something. Others, need to be a certain way, need to think a certain thing, need to think of us in a certain way, need to be happy all the time. And if they're not happy, that means that we've done something wrong. And so the boundary of who's responsible for us, feeling full or feeling a certain emotion, we might be putting a lot on other people, and that can lead to a lot of suffering, not just for ourselves, but in relationships. So usually boundaries help us in mental health get at actually taking ownership back of our emotions, and actually having some agency and separate identity from others. And that can be associated with feeling safe, with having trust in ourselves, and also trust in relationships enough to be open and explore and to be flexible. So actually looking for boundaries and seeking them out, usually we say aids in being connected and being collaborative, like being in a team, like in close relationships. So boundaries, really focusing on talking about boundaries, can be is something that I do all the time during the daytime. I even give a lecture to the medical students about it. So it's something that is a strong point. Now, you flip back over to our Buddhist path. That's probably not something that we would say we are usually seeking out, like more delineation, more boundaries. We're usually what's more explicit in Buddhist literature, in what we're seeking, is actually boundlessness, kind of going beyond bounds of things. One of the epithets of the Buddha, one of the names of the Buddha, is Bhagavan, which in Sanskrit I think means like the fortunate one or the sacred one. The Tibetans, they usually they got really creative when they would take some Indian terms, and they would usually kind of combine a few ideas together. So Sangye is a Tibetan name for the Buddha, meaning both purifying away and accomplishing or perfecting qualities that get you to enlightenment. The name for Bhagavan in Tibetan is Jomdende. And in the book that I was talking about, Sir Richard Barron, under the guidance of many teachers, including Chagdu Tulku, they set about translating this. And actually one of the glosses that they referenced for Chomdende was, so Jom meaning conquering, and that means conquering what binds us to samsara. So conquering, so getting over bounds and limits. Den is usually possessing qualities and things, but then de is also the word for transcendence, for going beyond, and transcending both the limits of normal life, of samsara, but also even transcending thinking about oneself, one's own personal salvation. Transcending towards the aspiration to seek enlightenment for others. So even in the idea of, if you just start with the idea of the Buddha, that's a good place to start. Usually, it's built in like boundlessness and openness. And a lot of literature that we read is intentional, like saying that the profound reality, what we can truly be, is beyond conceptions, beyond beyond limits or bounds of what we might call something or understand something. And so usually we're going about reading literature to really, both to learn, but also to sometimes just reading it and hearing it helps us relax and ease from how we might normally kind of hold on to how things need to be. And we're usually also transcending, even in our practice, if we're practicing mindfulness of the breath, and we're becoming to know, we're settling into not just, we might get distracted by a thought, for example, while we're meditating. And we don't just, kind of think about, okay, is that thought valid? Is it a good thought? We actually can just say, hey, I'm thinking. We're actually changing our relationship and going beyond the minds of having to accept a thought as true and needing to be looked at. We're saying, oh, it's just something I'm going to go through. And we're actually, in some ways, going beyond the bounds of how we normally relate to our thoughts and our feelings and our ideas of who ourselves. Now, another place that Buddhism goes even further than mental health is we're also going beyond the bounds of what we think is reality, of our own, like our own possibilities, our own limits. We're often imagining and really getting in touch with the idea that we can send out compassion and love and strength to a whole world, beyond every single being around us, every single being in the universe. So that's normally we wouldn't think that that's possible. We wouldn't even think that I'm someone who has that capability, or that there's the capability even like be in connection with others in that way. So often we're really orienting towards boundlessness, towards opening up. So and there's other practices too. Where I started with thinking all this was with Tonglen, with the giving and taking. We're using boundlessness here as a way to actually, even though we're still maybe bound to the idea that we're somebody and there's others, the idea that we want to give and share all of our strength, our good merit, our any kind of wisdom, any kind of depth that we have with others, and help them not be stuck with their own suffering, with their own struggles, to be in connection. That breaking, going through, even though there are some bounds where we're saying there's something about us here, there's something about them there, we're really breaking the bind that that we have to just think of ourselves, or that we can't help many beings at the same time. We can still use some levels of you could say bounds or frames of reference to help us get out of some others. So that being with compassion and expanding the depths or the breadth of compassion is pretty freeing, actually. And there's some other language too. We're usually aiming for an experience of unfindability in some of our meditations. The idea that we might say we think we experience something, and we normally would say, oh, that's just that. It's that way. Like that's sometimes it might be about examining the hand, or thinking about who am I. It could be you feel the hand and you say, well, I have this idea of hand. Does it end? Does it start here? Does it start there? Does it start there? Does it start there? Where does it start and end? Or what if that finger was gone? What if I didn't have all, what if I just, didn't have this part of my fingers? We're breaking things down, and we might come to experience that, yeah, there's these sensations, there's these thoughts, and they're just coming and going. But there's not really the thing that we thought was there isn't there. And that might be scary at first, but there can be some freeing and peace there. And even the literature too. I mean, I'll just give an example of how much our literature really is oriented towards openness and being beyond concepts. So I'm going to read here. This is on page 115. And this is on the section Longshan Raksham is talking about the idea of what is ultimate truth. What is the ultimate experience that we can have of ourselves and of reality? As to what characterizes ultimate truth, it is in essence a freedom from dualistic elaboration, in that it cannot be truly realized by means of verbal descriptions and the like. So already we're beyond thought, we're beyond description. It cannot be understood by means of anything other than itself. It is beyond concepts, for the souling factors of ordinary mind and mental states subside within the basic space of phenomena. That word would be the Dharma Dhatu, or the Chuying, if you're a Sanskrit or Tibetan enthusiast. I'll skip a little further down. In brief, Nirvana is a state of profundity and peace. It is basic space, completely pure by nature, and it is the mind free of all obscuration that realizes that space, the timeless awareness of Buddhahood, to which this completely pure field manifests without change. And so, just reading that, it kind of you can let go of worries from the day of there can be this experience of being held and open at the same time. There's so many things that we're free of and that we can go beyond. But I want to then get to, there's a lot of implicit things that are about boundaries that are still there in our Buddhist practice. And so I just wanted to kind of muse on a few of those. So there's a lot of probably terms that we probably could say are, you could say, are kind of correlates or maybe synonyms in some way for boundaries. Some things might be refuge or protector or guide. It could be things like vinaya or ethics or certain principles or vows that you might take. So there are ways, there's different flavors of how we still find boundaries as still being helpful. So like I mentioned earlier, there might still be progressive ways that we're letting go of bounds. Like it might be that that when we practice giving and taking, we're still holding onto some bounds of something about ourselves here and others there, but we're letting go of and that might help us get past some other boundaries. One thing that we've heard a lot of from our teachers is how important being at ease is. Being at ease is what gets us to helping us open up to our experience, to be ready to trust ourselves, to try out new things, have experiences that might challenge us. So being at ease is a pretty important element to really settling down and taking on, having courage, essentially, to learn and to expand ourselves. Being at ease is also reflective of actually what reality is at nature. If, when we're in that open space that we read, that basic space of phenomenon, that's there's nothing to do. There's nothing that we have to fix because we're already present. If we're doing things where we think, or we need to get away from something, or we have to try, if we're doing effort, all of that says that we're not actually in the present. We're thinking about, we're pulling in some judgment from the past, or we got some direction we're going to in the future. We're not, there's part of ourselves we're cut off from. And so being at ease is actually practicing like being in our full selves. And we need safety to be at ease. If we're not feeling like we can be physically safe or emotionally safe, if we're worrying about being basically something impinging on us and coming into us and coming into our experience, or us being kind of being left or abandoned, it's hard to be at ease. Then we're going to be worrying about our safety. And so actually seeking out safety and knowing where bounds are can be really important, actually, for us to settle in to our sessions. So like even in our meditation sessions, actually the technical definition of mindfulness. So usually in meditation, we talk about mindfulness and awareness. And mindfulness is, technically the dry definition is just recollection of the instructions of what you're supposed to be doing. And then the awareness is what we usually think of as mindfulness, is the being basically present one pointedly in the present moment and aware of what our experience is. So even just having the idea of, okay, what we're going to be doing, what we don't need to be doing, those bounds actually help us to settle in and have some confidence in knowing where we're going with our practice. Even the way that we might set up our meditations, our meditation space, or setting aside some time. We might have our insight timer, our beeper on our phone, so that way we don't have to keep worrying about, well, where does this start? Where does it end? What else do I need to be responsible for? The Tibetan word for retreat is actually sam, which means like limit or boundary. So, and it usually means the boundary of what you are going to keep from doing. It might be that you don't leave a certain area, you don't take up certain activities like email and WhatsApp and Twitter or the news or other work responsibilities. In that way, that also crosses over to a lot of talk about ethics and so the word I mentioned earlier, vinaya, like the moral rules or disciplines or the vows that we might take. And really, in essence, those are usually around helping us be free from certain effects that might happen in our minds from undergoing certain activities. Like if we say we're going to let go of, we're going to take a break from intoxicants, for example. Not that we have to. It might be that we're saying, I don't want to be put under the sway of how intoxicants might throw my mind around, and it might unsettle me, and how that might make me suffer down the road and get in the way of things that are important to us. Just one example. We also can have boundaries, or you could say feeling safety, at least, and trust through our inner experience with practice. We can have faith in hearing that, and seeing the effects that, the word teba in Tibetan usually means kind of some mixture of faith and trust and confidence. And there's different flavors of that. We can be inspired by seeing how practice has really helped others, and how people have changed in their lives, and how they're enjoying themselves and the strength that they have. And we can have a deep confidence too in knowing where our practice can take us. So I know that Lama Harvey sometimes at the end of a practice says to slow down and just take time to see how the practice has affected you, for good or bad. No judgment, just to see how you're different at that point than you were before the practice. I know for me personally, the first time I did a retreat, it was just 2 days. It was a Theravada style practice, and I remember the first day or two, I was in utter agony. I was like crying half the time. I was freaking out and having intense dreams. But that came and went, and I got to a point of seeing how the momentariness of my judgment of this is bad, or this stinks, or this needs to change, like how that would come and go. And I was like, okay, like like these teachings on momentariness, on impermanence, on the idea of like the components of what make us up, like, yeah, these can make a difference. And like I saw how it went, and so I knew I had some boundary, essentially, of saying, like, this is like, there is strength here, and I can take on, like, this is the extent to which I know this teaching is alive for me. And so we can also, it's maybe a little bit of an interesting twist, it might be the stretch, but we can have at least confidence and trust from where we've gone in practice. And there's even some of the other kind of more metaphorical examples. So if you have any exposure to, like, hearing about mandalas, for example, one of the components of a mandala is, and it's usually your experience of getting to know a deity, which is the embodiment of the depth of your total capabilities and your total connection with reality. But there's a lot of elements going into it, and usually some of the outside elements are, there's usually like a ring of fire and things, but two important elements are there's rings of protectors usually. And there's the male protectors facing out, the female protectors facing in. The male protectors facing out are usually this sense of keeping out hindrances or obstacles from the outside, and the female protectors looking inward to say, actually helping you have boundaries with things that might get in the way internally, or within our own mental or emotional experience. So there's actually there's some language around saying we need to have, like, it's okay to ask for help and guidance and some boundaries to feel safe to enter in this, to fully commit and jump into the present moment. I think, and we can also say that part of refuge, just asking and seeking refuge, it is a commitment. It is saying, I trust in this. And it is also asking for protection and saying, I want to have some boundaries and some help with things that I don't know how to deal with, or things that I feel scared or overwhelmed or controlled by. So seeking refuge too is a way of actually asking for help with the boundary. And we seek refuge from the Dharma, the Sangha, and the Buddha. And the Buddha is usually also talked about as a guide and a protector too. One place I'll just mention for food for thought, I won't get too much into, if we have some exposure to Tibetan style Buddhism, or, you could say Vajrayana or Tantric style Buddhism, we have a really deep connection usually with what we would call the teacher. It could be an outward teacher, the sense of like a lama or a teacher from within. And there's a very strong trust and openness to that principle. And so we really do actually need to have a lot of trust in building and saying, can we trust, if it's especially an outward person or some part of ourselves, can we really trust this person to have the complete, the complete intent of the whole path of all enlightenment? Because we're really saying that we're going to trust completely in this path, and that we think that the intent is never wrong. Is never, like, the path forward is wholly true. So there's usually also a lot of literature around, if you're going to think about finding your outer teacher, actually, like, spending years in being really careful. Like, don't just commit yourself completely, because it might be that something happens that really could be traumatic. That something that for you, either that you experience with that teacher or you hear it happened in another context, that can be very traumatic. And so we have to have a lot of trust and groundedness to really jump into that path. So we've gone through, we started talking with the idea of healing and wholesomeness. And we talked about change and how connection builds our change. We talked about first a little bit of boundaries, and then we got into boundlessness and going beyond those boundaries. Now then we ended up also seeing, just kind of reflecting a little bit of different examples of boundaries in our practice, things that might be kind of implicitly there. So I'll end here with a few things. There was, maybe if I had a few hopes or wishes for what these ideas or these reflections might bring for you. One is that you could relish or deepen in some way. You could think a little further on your sense or your relationship with boundaries, or with boundaries that could that could help be in place to help you transcend or break through or continue on the path of change, which is a treacherous one, and it takes a lot of courage to go down that. So if there's some way that you want to be in touch with boundaries, hopefully you can also then know and then also own those boundaries and seek those protection circles that you need, and that you need to take on the change and the healing that you deserve and that you want and that you need. And at the same time, to also be able to indulge a little bit in transcendence, knowing that there can be some, what to think about, whatever balance you need between boundaries and boundlessness, and to know that these sometimes aren't really contradictory. Those are the things that I was hoping to get to. So I'll end there. That takes us to about 2 minutes before our meditation hour. So you can stretch, get off camera for a minute, whatever you need, and we'll be back.